Okay, well, you brought the House up, so let's talk about
Absolutely.
that. That was the big story back in February.
It was.
For your candidacy. And the defense minister said he was going to ask his people to look into it. I haven't heard anything.
The relocation program is a very good program that's been in place for decades. In this instance, it's supervised by a Conservative Minister of National Defence. It's his program under Conservative Treasury Board rules, under a Conservative government. The intent is to compensate soldiers for many years of moves.
Right.
And my family certainly falls into that category. And everyone gets it after 20 years service, every veteran. And the rules are very clear, and they actually tell you this when you go through your briefing prior to your final signing of the papers. You can move next door, you can move 1.4 kilometers away, or you can move to the other side of the country. And the main issue is the real estate and legal fees. It's part of a compensation package. So in our instance, for example, and I'm by no means unique in terms of the number of times that we moved. So we first moved into Ottawa in roughly 1990. Like a whole bunch of other military families, we had 4 to 5 days to pick a house, which we did. You get a house hunting trip, and I think the maximum period is around 5 days. And you've got 5 days to say, we're going to go right there. So it's very often not the perfect house on your retirement. Every other time you move, you're doing so at the government's request. You're fulfilling a military duty. In my case, I left my family there for 12 years in Ottawa while I zipped around on Her Majesty's service doing other stuff. And at the end of days, when I knew I was going to hang up my military spurs, because the 35-year point is sort of a limit, you are comforted by the fact that you can always have one last choice where you get to decide as an individual where you want to move in the house of your choosing, subject to your budgetary issues. I think the whole idea behind the Liberal policy of an open and transparent competition open to all, I present my credentials to the people of Ottawa-Orléans, and they get to choose amongst candidates. It's great for the citizens of the riding because they have a couple of candidates from amongst whom to choose. No one is entitled to get the nomination. Everyone's got to work for it, and everyone is very hard, and we're all members of the same Liberal family. As well, a key point, in September, October of last year, I was approached by a députation. Je suis bilingue, ma famille vient de Montréal. A deputation or a group of Ottawa-Orleans citizens who asked me to come out and run for the federal member of parliament, which I met them, I talked to them. It's quite an impressive group of people, quite a large group. And in part in response to their efforts, they started a movement to try and, quote, draft me, unquote. I was very willing to be drafted, and I'm delighted to do so. And I really am enjoying the interaction with the citizens and getting to know them better. Backtrack. So the first conversation I had with him was years ago in Wainwright, when he came out as a visiting parliamentarian to learn more about the Army. And I was very impressed by his enthusiasm, his understanding of the soldiers, their issues, and as well as willingness to learn. And I next saw him on much the same sort of activity a couple of years later, where he was even more impressive. So after I retired from the forces, I took a look around. As mentioned, I felt I had more to offer in terms of dedication to public service. I did a comparative analysis between the Conservatives and the Liberals, and I guess it was a defining moment for me when Justin Trudeau assumed the leadership of the Liberal Party. I was very impressed by his style of inclusiveness, his ability to make tough calls, to listen to people around him, to seek counsel, but actually to demonstrate those leadership attributes, which I find admirable, of saying, no, this is my decision to make and I'm taking responsibility for it. I think soldiers deserve a choice, and so some soldiers may well prefer to have a lump sum up front. Some other soldiers may well prefer to have a lifelong pension. I believe that in giving soldiers as much choice as possible is our sacred duty. And why is it that the Conservative government is attacking this whole idea of a sacred duty, something which was enunciated, you know, close to a century ago by a Conservative Prime Minister? We owe those troops who've literally bled for us or suffered severe psychological trauma more than we can ever repay. There's an argument to be made that by serving the country as an elected official, I mean, that is service, and there's different types of incoming fire one gets when you're in elected office, as I'm finding out. So I would never try to set myself up on a higher moral plane. I think perhaps I have a greater understanding of what the veterans are going through. I have a greater understanding and level of knowledge of the impact of the technicalities of the Veterans Charter and the impact on moving equipment procurements continually downrange and delaying getting the troops, sailors, and aircrew the equipment they need. Absolutely. So the next biggest issue is probably some environmental funding to support the Green River Action Plan with the Ottawa River cleanup, and also Petrie Island, which is, I believe it's a national treasure. If you haven't had the opportunity to go out there and take a plunge on the beach, it's wonderful, but it needs some work. And right after that, in terms of priority, is making sure that the federal resources to match provincial and city efforts to get the LTR actually out to Orleans. So Orleans has probably got the highest commute percentage of people, certainly within this portion of Ontario. And it's having a very negative impact on the environment. All those cars on the Queensway, you're well aware of the issue of the split, which is a humongous traffic jam every morning and every evening. Quality of life will be improved, and so will efficiency. So people will be spending less time actually sitting in their cars, getting frustrated and irritated, and being able to zip with greater efficiency back and forth.